Welcome to Sacred, the podcast that invites you to reclaim your intuition, resist exploitive systems, and remember the love that brought you to teaching and caregiving in the first place.
We are your hosts,
Ángela Carolina Garcia
and Lauren Stauble. Join us on a rough and tumble journey of reckoning and transformation.
Hey everyone, welcome. Today we have Christian Martinez and Areli Porras on the show. I guess I'm a little bit excited to speak to you guys today because of the context in which we've met and the work that you're doing in California. And so we originally met at a conference in Harvard where Christian and Areli shared their stories and the work that they're doing with the Camino Program. And their system is in, to me, what I would consider radical resistance to a system that has exploited and taken advantage of Latinos. But I'll let Christian and Areli speak a little bit more on that in a few minutes. But Lauren, if you could please ground us, that would be great.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Feel free to arrive as you are. And in honoring choice, this is an invitation. If it feels right to you, then sit up nice and tall and just feel whatever it is you're sitting on. Or if you're standing, feel the floor or the grounds below you. And then from there, take a deep breath in and exhale. And take this moment to just be present with how you are right now. No need to change anything. Just honor how you are arriving today. And if that feels right, you can stay there. Or you could take another deep breath in and imagine like the waves of the ocean, just kind of breathing in, kind of pulling back. And then exhale, that kind of pouring over like the waves on the shore. And then inhale, feel that kind of like magnetic pull back. And then exhale, pouring forward. And then maybe even just kind of, you might close your eyes if that feels right. Get into this feeling of that back and forth energy of the waves, but we are mostly water. So feeling that if it feels right to you. And then as you are ready, coming back to whatever it was you felt at the beginning that you're sitting on or standing on. Coming back to a kind of stillness. And then opening your eyes slowly if they were closed. You might look around your space wherever you are at this moment. Take it in. If there are other people there, you might smile at them or smile for yourself if there's nobody there with you. And we'll start our conversation for today.
I guess it could go either way, whoever wants to answer first, or only one. It's up to you really, Christian and Areli. But if you would share a little bit more about who you are and the work that you do and the work that and the love that brought you to working with young children and youth.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the space and time, the invitation. My name is Christian Martinez. That's my government name, but I go by Poeta Galactico because I come from outer space. Growing up here in the U.S., I was told I was an alien due to my legal status in this country. So I kind of dove into that persona and created into an alter ego, which is Galactico, means galactic, come from outer space. I was born in Uruapan, Michoacan, Mexico, came to Oakland, California at the age of 10. and I've been living here since then. An educator, but really a community innovator since I've been living here. And the movement that I'm on, the journey is redefining success for people like myself who come from similar backgrounds.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Areli, please.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely want to echo an appreciation for that grounding practice. That was very helpful. And thank you for having me. Definitely. My name is Areli Porras. Like Christian said, that's my government name. I go by Coach C. I am students and people's coach. I'm everybody's coach. I just kind of naturally took onto that persona. Similarly to Christian, I came to this country as an immigrant and was kind of assigned many, many labels, which pretty much paved what my definition of success or what my outlook of education was going to be like based on those experiences. And a lot of those, instead of kind of leaning in on the pain, more so looking at it like, how is that a gift? How can I contribute back? How can I ensure that this doesn't happen to others? And so seeing my mom have very, very many difficulties navigating, one, the system, and two, the language, is really what kind of led me to be the educator and person that I am today. Which is creating systems, ensuring that they're accessible and equitable for all, and always pushing the status quo and asking questions when no one else is asking, to ensure that many of the practices that we put in place in our students can actually equally translate at home, so that they don't feel like they're navigating two separate lives, like their home life or their school life, similarly to how I grew up. So that's just a little bit about what got me into the work and a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is the second time I hear it, and a very different iteration of that. And I'm deeply inspired by the way you show up in your advocacy. It's very different from the way that I advocate for young children, or even very different in the way that I advocate for myself. But I think that's also due to circumstance, right? Like, although I'm a Mexican, I was born on this side of the border, or on the US side of the border. And so circumstance and the way that we advocate is very different based off of the context that we're in. So thank you for sharing those stories and being open to the vulnerability.
Thank you.
So what's bringing us together today is, our podcast is called Sacred. And I think that, Angela and I, we came to your table when we met you. Angela was like, can we sit right with them? And so I think that there's our nervous systems kind of sense when there's other beings in the space that are kind of honor relationship, the sacredness of relationships, and interbeing is a word that has come into my world lately. But can you tell us about, because both of you are rooted in community it's a central focus. And I know Christian, especially family as part of that context. Either one of you speak to what a sacred relationship means to you and how that relates to the work that you do.
I'm happy to go, but I pause. I'll let you dive in.
Yeah. I think I have learned in the last 2 years, in stepping into like a more leadership and more seen role, that a sacred relationship is like a reflection of the relationship I have with myself. How reflective can it be of whether what we are attempting is like contributing to the cause that we want to see, the outcomes that we want to see? So, for example, when I think of like trust and honesty and equal communication, maybe some of the things that we want out of a relationship is like, how am I ensuring and reflecting of what that looks like for me? How am I showing up in that space? And how am I like providing that space for others to show up in the same way? So a lot of my sacred relationships have really been, I think, very reflective and willing to go through any like barrier or I pause there, not a barrier, willing to go past the system. I think like seeing two people as humans past the system, past the problem, past the current circumstance, and like who are these two humans having this interaction or this common goal, and how can we continue to reflect on this to ensure that we both don't harm the relationship in the fight for the system, if it makes any sense. Yeah, that has been something that I just like in the last 2 years have been very reflective about, based on the experiences and situations I've been in.
Oh, I'm so glad you say that, because in the grounding that Lauren shared, there's this wave, right? Like the ins and outs. And like, when I think of a wave, I always remember like the power of the crash of the wave once it's come, but there's also then like this release, right? But like that is this like motion that happens within relationships when you're in a self-reflective place of there's this piece that's coming and this piece that's going, but if we're doing it together, it sort of forms this figure eight. And like that is what happens under the surface of a wave. It's this figure eight of coming and going. So I thank you so much for saying that, because it made that visual in my head.
Maybe, Christian, maybe you could say something about swim good is your passion, right?
Yeah. As you, thank you. Yeah, as when you were bringing us in about this, like we are mainly water and ocean. I just think about swim good and the meaning behind it. I think it kind of aligns with like this sacred relationship and bonds. Swim good was born from a place of no matter where you at in this ocean called life, you're gonna be okay if you just swim good, and that has been like a mantra that from an really early age I adopted, but I wasn't able to formalize into like what is really meant. And then when I met Areli and several other people, like our bond just, I feel, became clear that we are here for this mission. We are in this fight, and we are now walking in front of each other. Is like I'm walking beside you, and we are walking to create a better world, something that where we can all coexist. And for me, I feel like sacred relationships really align with that meaning of like we pushing. I really might be somewhere else. My homies might be somewhere else, but I know that one call away, like we can all align and be like, I'm here for you, because we fighting against something that's bigger than us.
Yeah, I very often say, I actually like very proudly say this about like my group of friends and sacred relationships. It's like, we're not a circle. We're more so a force that aligns. Like, it's just like, so it just expands. Like, it's just like, we're not trying to keep anything in. It's like, it's just a huge just force that aligns. Just thought I wanted to share that.
That's powerful, right? Like a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah,
like, come at me, right? Like, come at me. Like, let's go. It reminds me of rough and tumble. I love rough and tumble play in young children. And and in my adult life, I think in this, like even in my own sacred relationships, there's these moments that get really hard and uncomfortable, but those are some of my favorite moments of building and growing. And like, it builds that force. Like, I think that like, there has to be, like, when we think of what is force or how you create force, like there's something that's connected, right? Like the energy is connected or interweaved with itself to be able to hold that, to be able to be a force. So it reminds me of rough and tumble, and like that really hard, complex thing has to be happening in order for the force or the bonds that make force so strong to be able to happen. When you think of like chemistry and physics, that's what I'm thinking about. And you've shared a little bit about some of the systems that might interrupt sacred relationships, but if you could dive a little bit deeper into some of the interruptions that you've experienced that have sort of caused you to reckon with the current issues and have moved you into the work that you're doing or continue to move you through that work.
I really feel that a lot of the systems or just things that there were barriers and obstacles throughout my journey here in the US started at a really young age with being undocumented and that kind of dictating what success was going to look like for me at an early age when it came down to like education. I'm really honing in on education because I feel like a lot of times we share our educational journey as if it was a free for all, but there's a lot of us who are outside looking in, um, knowing that we have knowledge, we have wisdom, but this institution sometimes leave us on the sidelines because we don't have the certain access or papers or labels to get in. So I think one of the biggest things for me has been education institutionalized, like in coming from places like I know we mentioned Harvard and it was a privilege being there, but also like I got homies on the block who will have that knowledge, but they were not granted that access to get there, and therefore they don't have the network or the privilege to navigate certain conversations. And then access also connects to capital, right? And if you're trying to start like a business or organization, it comes easier when you are part of those institutions that a lot of times perpetrate that systemic violence. So I think I'm in this fight. I'm a citizen of the U.S. Not too long ago, 2 months ago, became that, and I decided to continue on this path of like I'm the plug, no degrees, because I had a fake ID since I was just 13, and I say that proudly because I have navigated the currents of systemic violence at a really young age, and I'm still thriving, I'm still swimming, and I just want to showcase to young young folks in my community and beyond that there's a way to like find success. You don't have to like simulate. Um, and I just choose to be in this fight in this way. It's at times it feels like a revolutionary suicide, but I feel that there's so much that is unexplored when it comes to like different ways to find success and happiness in your life. We don't have to like simulate to institutions. I hope that gets to your question. But
I
that's one of the
Yeah,
things that I've been wrestling with.
yeah. You were saying what you were saying, and like my dad just came into my mind.
Mm.
And my dad is born in the US, raised in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and then educated in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. And then when they migrated over, when my grandpa was ready to be was able to bring his family over, um, my dad came over and entered the school system. And my dad doesn't talk a lot about his young life. Like he talks about the really good things, but there have been moments where he talks about how the school system treated him. And he was like, I was in the classroom for dummies, he would say. Like they would put me in the classroom for dummies because I couldn't speak English. And he also is someone who couldn't sleep at the age of 14 and turned to alcoholism and into drugs. And he's also someone who's been in and out of prison, and he's also an entrepreneur, and he is also a man of faith, and he's a builder, and he's a songwriter, and he's an artist. And I think that one of the things he always tells me is he's like, I just want to be happy. And I never wanted to work for anybody else. I always wanted to do my own thing. And I've done it. I'm living my best life, he says. He's 60 some years old now. And he's never going to retire, he says. But he says, I'm living my best life. I have my house. I built my house. I don't have any debts. I have 2 kids. I have a wife. I'm living a good life. I've done the thing that I wanted to do. And when you were speaking, I'm like, oh yeah, my dad resisted the system. Like everyone wanted him to go to college. Everyone didn't think he was ever going to not be in prison. Like there was so many stigmas about my dad. But if you talk to my dad, he's like, I'm living the best life. Like this is the life that I wanted, and I'm living it, and I'm living it well. And so thank you for sharing what you shared, because it brought my dad into this moment with me right now. So
Thank you.
Areli, please share.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing about your dad, because that also definitely that makes me think about like how as an educator, how do I definitely see that in the students that we serve. I definitely see that in the parents and the communities that we serve. And so like, how do I disrupt that? How do I advocate for that? While also like, I want to say like being an ally to my colleagues, because I definitely a couple years back had tried like, let's pull and push with full force, right? And I very quickly saw myself being the outcasted person in the school campus, right? Being the, and sometimes, unfortunately, without people even knowing my story, being the person who's projecting their traumas onto others, right? Like without people really seeing where I was coming from, or maybe like asking me, like, not that it's anyone's job, but like maybe trying to dig deeper of like, how have I processed that trauma and why is it showing, or why am I showing up in the way that I'm showing up for a student, right? And so I learned quickly, it's like, how do I also acknowledge that these teachers that are coming into our neighborhoods are also human and are also still learning and are not always as reflective and are also still very young too, some of them, right? Like, and so like, how do I become a person to bridge and connect versus like to disrupt and probably become like a barrier to a sacred relationship. I've learned that like leaning in a lot, even while it costs me sometimes, to try to share these conversations, to try to highlight some of the individual stories of students to teachers or educators of like not from our community. It's like, how do I lean in and how do I call them in without really being harmful? And this is like in alignment of like sacred relationships, because it's like, I've learned real quickly, it's not going to work the other way. And more so my traumas will be used against me. And then for whatever reason, kind of reflected onto the student. Well, that's not the circumstance, right? It's more so like I'm seeing students like your dad who were being penalized by the system, or were not being understood by the system, or were just not being set foot forth by the system. We have students who come in from foreign countries at the age of 10, right? At the age of 11, who were already working in their foreign country, in their country, and are now coming into like being a fourth grader, fifth grader. And so what does that actually do to their psyche? And what adult stopped to have that conversation with the student, right? And so thinking more of ways of like leaning in and becoming an ally, not so much at my mental health expense, but definitely to support the overall outcome, which is like creating equitable systems and accessible systems for families and students. Yeah, sorry, I said a lot, but hopefully the answer was in there.
Absolutely. Your answers, everything that everybody has shared is just really emphasizing the complexity of each moment, and when different people come together, and each group has a different each group has a life of its own, and could never be replicated in other ways, but it's hard work. Areli, I really appreciated how you were describing the way that you work to, I don't know, would you say that you're creating a space, or you're creating a container or a framework, or can you say more about, when you are going into an interaction that's really complicated, like what helps you? What is your guidance as you enter that? And you just kind of pulling us back to, I also loved what you said at the beginning about how, every sacred relationship kind of begins with the relationship we have with ourselves. I'm just wondering if that's connected.
Yeah. Well, before I enter any difficult, there is a framework that I use that I'll share, and I have no affiliation with the book. I just have been able to like take this framework and use it in multiple ways, and it works every time. And there is a book called Creative Hustle, and he shares this like that this book is about like creating changing your passions and who you are into like a hustle, right? Like, how do you actually turn this into something? And so it's a map drawn out. It's like 2 parallel lines. And then there's like almost like a hashtag, right? And on one side, you have all of your gifts, like who you are. And then, and the other opposite side is like the values and the outcomes, right? And so read the book if you want to hear about like values and passion. But the way I've used that same exact hashtag time frame and before entering a difficult conversation to be able to engage is first I have that hashtag diagram for myself. I'm going to first reflect on what are the things that happen that are like impacting me heavily. Am I mad about this? Am I sad about this? Am I pissed about this? Like, and then dig deeper into why. Is this a part of me that is really upset? Or is this a value or a mission statement in our organization that we are not honoring? And that's why I'm pissed, right? So identify my ego and identify the thing that's happening really that's like creating harm. And I'm coming from a place of give benefit of the doubt that every adult in a school building is not there to create harm, and we are all equally for that mission, right? And so I reflect on that. And then in the center, I think about who are the people or key players that probably took part in this, whether it was a harm or not creating harm or not leaning in or not advocating. And then I think about like, what are some of the values or beliefs that different individuals may have? And if this is an interaction between a teacher, a student that I witnessed, then I will name like kind of like each of those individuals' perspectives in my lens, obviously. And then on the other side, I look at the outcome. What do I want out of this conversation? Do I want the teacher to think about more inclusive ways? Do I want the teacher to get to know the student more? Do I want the teacher to get to know me more, right? Like, what is the actual thing that I want out of this complaint or this conversation? Because I will for sure tell you that I get pissed about a lot of things I see, but I have learned that it's not worth leaning into every single one of those things. 1, for my own mental health. 2, for sacred relationships, because we're both here working for a common cause in a building that's here to support students. And so this is in that lens. And so I have that reflection myself. Once I have that reflection and I'm clear on the outcome that I want out of that conversation, and check my ego that it is actually in benefit of student and not in benefit of making sure I am accredited for something. And so once I have that, I kind of redo that framework again for the entire conversation, right? When I'm having the conversation, hey, what are the things that you value most out of what are the things that you did? How did you feel that? What are the things that you did? How did that make you feel? What would you like to see next time? And same thing for every party. In the center, we identify who are the people who are going to help us stay accountable to this? What are the frameworks or systems or practices that we're going to do to make sure that we're accountable for this? And then kind of like, when is the next checkpoint? And so that can look very differently. One of the most recent ones that I've had is of a supervisor who is like, I am having a coaching session with another peer. It's someone who I coach, and they feel like their supervisor micromanages. And so they didn't know how to have that conversation. And so we went through the framework, right? I helped that person do the framework of like, is micromanaging something that is like, only you see it that way? Is that how everyone sees it? So really digging into that framework, for 1, allow for self-reflection. 2, to be clear on the goals and the outcomes that you wish to see out of the thing. And 3, to kind of like keep that humanness of everyone, because everyone feels, everyone goes through things. And whether we like it or not, we all have an ego. So kind of like, covering all those ends that I think disrupt being able to have sacred relationships. So.
Thank you for that.
It would have worked out better if I had a whiteboard. You would have seen
crazy. Oh, I think so. Like, I think I'm going to need that for my regular day-to-day job. That's great.
Yeah, even just the process.
Sorry, I even use it for there's been teachers or adults in the building that tell me I don't know how to build relationships. So hell no, I don't know how to build relationships with kids, right? And I'm salutes the person that can be vulnerable and admit that, because it is true for some of us humans, right? Like, we don't know how to build relationships, more or less one with a kid who I do not know. And I use that framework to try to kind of build like a let's put it on paper. How are you going to build this relationship? And so it kind of like, it's like an initial framework as well.
Yesterday, Lauren and I were talking about like humanity, like how do we humanize ourselves? And how do we humanize ourselves within the context of all the subcultures that make our humanity, right? Like, I am a Latina, I am a plant lover, I am an educator, I am an artist, hopefully soon to be a poet. I am all of these things. And sometimes we're only identified for like the education we have or for the status that we hold. And there's this piece of, but at the end of the day, like beneath all of that, you're human. And I think that the framework that you were describing really gives us a moment to pull us back into our humanity, or encourages us, or it can be used as a tool to bring us back to our humanity, because you talked a lot about like remembering, right? Or like going back, like I'm reflecting, and like you have to remember to be able to be reconnected to your humanity. Sorry, my puppy's chewing the cord, hopefully. Okay. And so in thinking about all of those things, and even hearing the stories that you've shared about the way that the systems have treated you and have worked against you, what do you do, or what sustains your ability to continue doing this work?
Good question.
Yes,
And if we could invite you to answer in the context of spirituality, which we know means something to everyone. So please interpret it as you find meaning.
I think for me, what continues to give me the energy to do the work is knowing that a different world exists out there, and we can all take part in creating it. Back in 2019, we had the privilege to create a magazine called Find Your Galaxy. And it was grounded in the idea that all of us are stars, and together we can shine even brighter. And that's something that it's been stuck with me for the past like 4 years. This is like right before the pandemic happened. And every time I'm feeling down, because there's some really like down moments and moments where you're like, why am I doing this? I can be working somewhere else, not thinking about systems of oppressions every day. Like, why am I doing this? And then I think about creating a new world. Not for me, not for Areli, but the younger generation. And I feel like that is a task that was passed down to me from my ancestors. Like they were like, Christian, you're gonna be one of them, and it's time for you to carry that torch. And I cannot walk away. I feel like I've been gifted with that, and I feel really proud to like continue to do this work. At times it feels like I'm ahead of the time with some ideas that I have, but then they kind of come into fruition like years later. And I was like, I was right. Like my gut feeling was right. Like there is this narrative that is different. So following your gut, following your energy. And I'm a big believer that when things align, it's because you're meant to be in that place.
For me, it has been completely divorcing the idea that was implanted of what success looks like, what a successful educator looks like, what I think if it's in a book written by an older white man, like I've completely divorced it. And I have really aligned with my own reflections, really tapping into my ancestry. Journaling a lot has been, lately I've been doing this thing of like write 3 pages no matter what, like even if it doesn't make sense, because then it's a trip. It's a trip. Like when you go back and read, there is many things that come up that kind of just align without even trying. Something that I've been doing, like to feel more connected to my human side, is I've been purposely trying to network outside of education. I realized that like my entire circle and connection and peoples were like somehow within education. And that at some point becomes very just like, it's just a rut. It's a rut. And at some point you hear the same rhetoric over and over and over that it almost like doesn't allow you to unplug off of that negativity. And so purposefully putting myself in places where I can connect and network with folks, that like-minded folks, but outside of education. And you really start to see how sometimes we close down our own thinking because of the educational narratives that are just like being recycled throughout the system. Just completely divorcing that and trusting your intuition, trusting yourself. Yeah. Your purpose.
You both mentioned ancestral connection or connecting back to our ancestors. And I think it was you, Christian, who mentioned like that was like what the calling that we have to do this work. And there have been moments I think in most of the episodes on this show, I've talked about how I've desperately have wanted to leave education or have not wanted to be so aware of the way that the systems exploit us. Like, can I please just have my blinders back on? Someone put them back on.
Plug me back in.
Like, please, because my anxiety would like be so much lower. Like I'd be worried about like the fridge not being stocked or something. Like I don't know. I'd worry not about the things that I worry about, and my anxiety would not do what it does if I had my blinders back on. But what was coming to me was how I think a part of what, and I maybe I've talked about this before on the show, but what like the calling of being in this moment or doing this work. And I feel that really deeply with my family, that I'm the person who, like, I hold this middle space. Like I'm the first one to have graduated with a master's degree. I'm the first granddaughter. I'm the first niece. I'm the first so many things in my family. I'm the first one who like left. And it also comes with like this responsibility. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to, like, I just want to like be like my little cousin. I just want to like not have to deal with all of the stories. Like I hear my grandma's story and my grandpa's story. I hear my mom's story and my dad's story. And there's something about this, like I can hear my abuelos. My abuelos are like the ancestors that I'm the most connected with. And they're like, no, like, you don't have, like, we didn't leave our home for you to also be suffering. You can also be happy. You can also rest. You can also, like, this is why we did what we did. And it's this interesting place of being in that limbo. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, try sharing your title or what you do to your grandparents, and you'd realize how much you like overcomplicate things, because they'll like they won't be able to understand like what do you. There's someone that does that, and so you really like it helps me think of when I tell my mom what I do, and she asks these questions, and it kind of makes me think of like, wow, sometimes I do kind of overcomplicate or feel overcomplicated in what I do. Where it's like, that does seem pretty simple, huh? Like, I do just connect families to resources. Yeah, you're right. That's all I do.
There's this episode that I listened to on Finding Your Way. It's a podcast also. And the author that was being interviewed talks about how when when you go to your grandma's house and everyone comes to your grandma's house, everyone gathers, everyone gets along, like everyone sits around the table and has a conversation, and like it is what it is, but like it's moving and it's going and it's lively. And she says, for grandmas, like they know how to do this. The grandmas know how to bring people together and like settle these moments. But they have like this special way of doing it. And we, as when we gather in diverse groups, and if we want to create something similar, we have to be very intentional about the way we curate space and the way that we bring people together and the way that we create conversation in space. You saying that reminded me of that, of how grandmas can do it. But when we're so different, it does make things much more complicated, right? We don't all share a similar story, or the intersectionality isn't as clear. But it is as simple as like we're bringing people together. Yeah.
I'm switching a little bit, but I think staying on the same train. Earlier, Christian, you said something about thriving. You said that you are, in your resistance, you are thriving. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And this is something we're really interested in, imagine a world where we are thriving, because sometimes we get in, Areli, you mentioned too, of like, sometimes just in the education bubble, we get stuck on like, there's no money, this system is impossible. But it like sorry, so many ideas are coming right all at the same time, because of what you've shared. And there's this, what does that future look like? Like, what do you giving and receiving look like in this context of thriving? Can you say something about that, Christian?
Yeah, I can dive in on this part about thriving. I think the idea of like thriving versus surviving has been really like in my frontal cortex for like a real long time. And in that process, I feel like there's this gap that I think 5 years ago, it really like sit down with me, and I was like, peace of mind. What is peace of mind? And I was like, wait, if I get peace of mind, I can really ideate on like whatever idea I have and like build up on that and have the freedom and the privilege to like be like, okay, I can move towards that more. When we are on survival mode, to the way I was raised and the way I navigated, I had no time to think about like, how can I thrive with this idea? How can I thrive in my job? How can I make something more fun for me and really find purpose within? So when we start shifting from surviving to like thriving, you allow this space for peace of mind to sit down and really like start to innovate. That's why I said at the beginning, like I'm a community innovator, because I feel like there's so many things that we can put our energy towards in our communities to make it a better world, to make sure we are able to coexist and keep people who've been there for years in their communities. And it's like, but let's make sure we give those folks peace of mind so they can think about what's an idea that can better serve the community, serve ourselves, and accept that and move towards that. So I feel like thriving and surviving is a hard shift, because when you've been in survival mode for majority of your life, you tend to stay there. And I see that a lot with like my mom. Like she's always hustling, always working, and I tell her, you need to slow down, like take care of yourself and take a pace. But she's like, no, this is all I know. Like I came to the US because I want to survive. And I was like, no, let's go ahead and thrive and take a step at a time. So I think that's where I was going with when I said the thriving piece.
Thank you. That reminds me too. I don't remember if we've talked about this yet, but I know Angela and I have talked about it in my work community. We've talked about how in education, self-care is a form of resistance right now. And it's in order to say, I need this, I need to take a break, I need to drink some water, is telling somebody no. Telling something no, but we need to say yes to ourselves. So I guess what I'm getting at is in that process, where we like, how do you get there? Is there a tool that helped you? What popped the survival mode bubble for you?
Yeah, I say it's not completely gone. It's not completely gone because there's always like reminiscences of like what survival was. But I feel like in education, and I say this with love and care, I feel like even with an educator, there's a level of privilege, right? Like working in your community where you see the kids coming from versus like coming to the community where the kids are coming from. For me, that kind of broke the bubble of like, oh, surviving, I'm thriving, and I can be changing the system within in to help them see that, yo, in your communities you can thrive. I do agree with the self-care piece about educators, but I also feel like a lot of times we co-opt that and then we leave that work to some of the folks who are working in the communities and are from the communities, and now they got to pick up the slack because there's work that needs to be done, and a lot of schools are under resourced, and therefore they don't have the money to pay someone else. So I feel like it's this constant tension that I feel when it's like, yes, let's self-care, but also who's going to reach out to the family, who's going to stay with the kid after school. And if there's nobody else, it's like, I can't do that. Like, for me, it just doesn't feel ethical, and morally, it just feels wrong. But to your point, I think the striving piece really stems for like wanting to see my community thrive as a whole and making sure that maybe in the process, I heard this quote probably 3 years ago. It's like, I know I'm not going to win. Areli's probably not going to win, but the cause is going to win. And really giving yourself to the cause that at the end of the day, it's going to be the community who's going to win. One kid is going to win. And that's the decision you got to make for yourself, because we might not win. We might need to sacrifice ourselves in order to see a better world.
Mm.
Well, go ahead, Areli. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know what else I can add to that. I think he definitely dropped it. I think so. I do want to add though to the self-care piece. It's like we also have to think about how like that in itself is subjective, right? I remember my mom, I'm pretty sure this is what she called self-care, was like those 20 minutes in the bathroom by herself while we were still sleeping in the morning. Like, that's self-care to her, while that may look very differently for someone else. And so like, I think it's been oversaid, but it can't be overstated, is like, we always have to check our privilege and like, what privilege do we have over the community that we quote unquote serve? Because if you, I've been learning a lot about like community organizing. And so when you look at the community, the political aspect of it, like you are someone, this is going to hurt some people. You're someone who does not live in the community and you come and work in the community, you are actually draining that community of resources. You are coming in, you are taking a paycheck, and you are not going to come and shop at that market. You are not going to buy your liquor at the corner liquor store, and you are not going to buy your clothes at the Ross down the street. So think about that. like really let that sit in and think about it the next time that you claim self-care as to why you can't stay 30 minutes after school for a difficult conversation with a student, right? So really think about that. Like, what am I taking? What am I withdrawing from this community account? And how much am I depositing into this community account? Because if you sit and reflect on that, I'm almost certain that a lot of us are like on overdrawn, just overdrawing from the community and not depositing in the equal amount or more. So just a reflection.
Preach.
Yeah. And the teachers, sorry, one more thing. And the teachers, if you are someone who can vote, right? I can't wait to the day that I can vote. And if you're someone who can vote, and you come into a community like this and you're teaching in a community like the one we serve, and you are not voting for that community, and you are not even a legal state, like you are not a registered voter for that community or that city, you're still like in a prior state, you're hurting us, man. You're hurting us. Yep. Especially in California. We have a lot of teachers that come in from foreign states and you don't register to vote within the local community, and that hurts communities.
Yeah.
Right? You're letting other people make decisions for the community that you quote unquote serve. And pause there.
No, I mean, thank you for the pause, and also thank you for what you said. And I'm thinking a lot about early childcare, and in early childcare, and it may be the same in your context in the way in the programs that you work in, but we get a lot of government funding, and it's not a lot compared to what K-12 gets, but we get grants, and right now the Biden administration has given millions of dollars, or maybe close to billions, to early childcare, and then so the grants go from the federal government to the state government, and then the state government decides which community leaders get these grants to then provide pathways for young children or for the teachers, or to build in the infrastructure or the workforce. And I happen to work for one of those organizations. And one of my, I guess something that I grapple with is my salary is a living wage salary. My benefits are of a privileged status. I work from home. And the teacher that I'm serving, or that my organization is serving, is still making the $13 an hour, the $19 an hour, doesn't have the benefits, doesn't have the access, doesn't have the subsidies that person needs to put their own child in childcare, even though they are the childcare workforce. And I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, how do we get as much money to the educators and to the children and to the families that really need it, knowing that the resources are so scarce, even when they are giving us so much. Yeah. And what you're saying reminded me of that, because thank you for my salary, and also how are you using the resources that you're getting as an organization to really make sure that they're getting to the children and the families and the teachers that really need those resources within the communities that we're serving.
And to Christian's point, when he talks about peace of mind, when we reach that level of being able to have a peace of mind in which now we can step into an advocacy mode, it's like, use that, right? Because that teacher who you serve may be trying to use her peace of mind to figure out how to provide for their own childcare while still serving a larger community. And so when we gain that peace of mind, I don't question it. It's like, use it for advocacy.
I'm thinking about, like, I have this in like the struggle within myself of, like, I know that, like, scientifically, like, understanding the way nervous systems work and the way that they connect with other nervous systems, that I need to be able to find a piece of calm, or a state of calmness, to be able to access the prefrontal cortex, to be able to make a decision that will benefit the most or be the wisest. And also with that, like, there is this like residue of survival mode that exists, right? Like, if we're in a state of heightenedness, like in the state of heightenedness is our calm, then we're still in that survival mode. And when I was hearing you talk, like this like picture came of, like, it's like this pulsation of when you're at your calmest, then in the safest way, be innovative and be a caretaker. And when you are reacting, or when your nervous system is heightened, then also be reflective enough to know that, like, this isn't the moment to be an activist, or this isn't the moment to make a decision. This is the moment of, like, okay, soon I have to go back to my pace of taking care of myself, to be at that space of calmness, to be able to advocate. Right? Like, it's this pulsation that happens within the nervous system.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
That was deep.
Yeah.
It does make me think, Angela mentioned some of the issues in early childhood, right, is different a whole different system than K-12. And it really, we're at a point right now where it feels like it's really time to imagine something different. The way the system exists is that it's not functional. This is not actually, like, these puzzle pieces don't actually go together. I am very inspired by the work that you all are doing. And actually, Christian, you were expressing some excitement about what's coming down the line for you. I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. It's been 34 years in the process. I feel like throughout my existence on this earth, like especially like after 15, I've been really dabbling into like what is it that I want to put my energy on. And, co-founder of high school 5 years ago, being an educator for like 11 years now. And it wasn't really like feeling like it was it. And then one day, Camino Program just came through. And Camino Program is a program designated specific for migrant youth who might not find school as their main source of like finding success. So creating a program within the community to really help students find whatever success looks like for them, if it's jobs, training around professionalism, one-to-one mentorship, mental health resources, like really help them. I feel like myself, and I'm sure Areli feels the same way, we have this blueprint that a lot of times doesn't get this accolades and recognitions of how we have navigated life. But I feel like there's a lot of folks that can use this. And we have this blueprint that we want to like put this in paper, curriculum, and not really tied into like institutions that is really community based. So that's what we're working on. Hopefully comes into fruition in the next year or so to be a full on nonprofit.
Yay.
And I just got to dig a little bit deeper, but if you're open or willing to share, what are some of the pathways that exist to creating access for the migrant children and families and students that you all are working with?
That's a great question. I think I describe it as migrant youth, but there's also that this studies like undocumented migrant youth, right? And I feel like that's more of a need, and I feel like the students and the families that I had connected with are the ones that would be more inclined to like be ready to join this program. And honestly, what we're putting together is our own network. In California, even though it's a very like liberal state to a certain degree, there's still like places that will not hire folks, right? Places that you need XYZ in order to get hired. So what we are creating is a database that eventually will turn into an app where folks will be able to tap into like a directory of people within the Bay Area, Sacramento down to like San Jose, hopefully down to LA, so they can be like, oh, what? I really know someone in the Bay that can hook me up with a job. I'm gonna plug in. And it's like underground network where we are putting together for kids and even like young adults to like navigate life and find financially sustainable income.
Yeah. And to add to that too, it's just like the connection of resources. I think something that, no one told me about was just how, wow, I think everyone told me about how sad my oppression was, but no one ever told me about how to leverage that story, how that was not necessarily like the end of it all, and more so like, this is your story, these are the cards. And so now this is how you can apply it to your next things. And so also in a sense, creating that blueprint and giving students that support so that they can create that peace of mind at a much earlier age to be able to be innovative thinkers and to be able to think outside of like the regular 9 to 5, really tapping into their passions, really tapping into their gifts, and really tapping into the resources that we have. For example, when we talk about undocumented youth, I personally became documented in a very different way than anyone has ever seen, right? And so that being able to ask those questions and push those people and connect them to those community networks that are very accustomed and for many years have been doing the work of doing things differently. And so being living examples of that, connecting with other people just like us, to provide more examples of that in different ways, in different forms, in different shapes. And like Christian said, building that network of people who are far more just besides the word of being for the cause, more so like on the daily ground of the cause.
Wow. So I'm just gonna go move to California and tap in and plug in. Like it'll be great. It'll be great.
Do it. Let's do it. Yeah. Out over here.
Yeah, right. It's really powerful. It's really powerful. I think in the last few years I've really dived deep into this these terms. I think it's innovation and sustainability. And recently, through even tapping into ancestral wisdom and remembering the stories, I think something that Lauren and I talk a lot about is, and I should say that it's also a quote that my dad always says. He says, "There's nothing new under the sun." Mm. And so the part that Lauren and I talk a lot about is what is innovation. And with this idea that there isn't anything new under the sun, how do we tap into our ancestral wisdom and into into those ways of being that have been taken away from us, right? Our education system in our context hasn't given us the stories or hasn't told us the stories of our ancestral wisdom or our ancestors and the way that they designed systems. But when we think of innovation stories and we think about remembering or going back to there are so many examples of what sustainable systems look like. And when I hear you speak about your program, I think of how it's so much powerful to be able to tap into your neighbors and to plug into the person who has a similar story. And there is this space of empathy and there is this space of relationship that doesn't exist in the context of, oh, I went to Harvard and now I have this connection. There isn't the human piece to that. There's a piece of humanity that's missing when you're only networking through the context of the institution. But when you're networking through storytelling and when you're networking through commonalities and through the intersectionalities, then you're interconnected with your nervous system, right? Your stories are aligned or your experiences are aligned. So thank you for sharing that, because that's powerful. That's innovation. That's sustainability, the way you're talking about networking and building relationship and community in your area.
Yeah, it puts the power on the collective. Mm-hmm. It brings forth the knowledge that has for very many years and ages existed far long before the walls of institutions were up and became up. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that's sharing through story is a lot more powerful than kind of coming in with the big H or the big S on your sweater and knowing that doors are going to open, right? It's more humanizing and more to the core.
Yeah.
This is reminding me of Angela and I originally connected pedagogically over Reggio-inspired curriculum. And the Reggianos are insistent that you cannot take what we do and do it there. You use us as a mirror to see yourself better and to know your context because you saw a different one. So I feel like you offered us you offered us a really beautiful mirror for which, a context for that we might think about our own context. And I hope the listeners I bet there's neurons firing in everybody's brain and thinking about their own context. I hope. We have one last question for you. We are wondering, so where you're embarking on this new journey. It is extremely innovative and community, coming from the strength of the community. If you could, send a message to your younger self, what would it be?
I'm happy to dive in this one too. I think to the younger self of, I'm gonna go to the age of 13 maybe. Christian, who was already entrepreneur, but they didn't have the language to really name that. I was a hustler at the time. You are beautiful. You are an amazing human being. You have a heart that is made out of gold. Continue to pursue your energy and your goals and your idea because they they have power, and they're going to take you places. And remember that you are cared for. Elevate.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
I would look at myself as I won't say fifth grade. I think was when I really started to see the difference between me and others. And I would tell little Areli that you weren't meant to fit in. It's okay. Like, it's okay to feel the way you're feeling.
Mm.
It feels uncomfortable because you were not meant to fit into this. Keep doing you. Never change. Never change your laughter. You will continue to grow. You will definitely continue to grow, but never change the joy and the laughter that you have in there.
Thank you both. That feels like a beautiful way to end our conversation. So much gratitude for your spending this time with us and our listeners. And to the listeners, thanks for listening. To keep the conversation going and for monthly reflection prompts related to each episode, sign up for our mailing list.
If you want to play with us in real time, explore the ideas in the episode, please come to the next campfire chat. We look forward to the next sacred conversation with you.
Check out the show notes for details.